Ghost of Tsushima is by far the best game I've ever played this year, from the challenging combat, explorable world, interesting side quests, and the content that it offers. Many would believe it's what an Assassin's Creed game should be, but as much as I can see and understand the similarities, both Assassin's Creed and Ghost of Tsushima stand out in their own unique way, and that's coming from an Assassin's Creed veteran fan myself. I did, however, wanted to make a review when it came out, but when the game launched, it didn't have New Game Plus, so I decided to wait for a while until the game is 100% finished, as it would be unfair to review a game in its early stage, and during that waiting time, they released Ghost of Tsushima Legend, which adds another layer of things I wanted to add. I'm going to review the game by section, and there will be footage that may contain spoilers, and there's going to be a section where I'm going to talk about the story, which again is going to contain massive spoilers. Now that that's all out of the way, let's get on with the video. I personally was never a fan of the open world games set in the wilderness like Far Cry, Red Dead Redemption 2, Days Gone, and Horizon Zero Dawn. Maybe it's just my preference when it comes to open world games set in the populated cities like Division and Assassin's Creed Unity, but I remember that time when gaming company just made the world huge just for the sake of being huge. But there isn't anything memorable about the place you visit. The atmosphere just feels the same, and even if there is a difference, the map is so big that you don't even notice the difference. Ghost of Tsushima does a fantastic job creating an immersive experience that made me curious to explore more. Trust me, you know a game does a good job when you constantly use photo mode and it works so well in combat, exploration, or just wanting to take pictures. It's like the map was purposely made to use photo mode. Despite the map feeling big, it's actually smaller than Witcher 3 and Breath of the Wild, which explain the level of detail in the world and how diverse each part of the map is. But by any means, it's far from perfect as it follows the I'm not sure what it's called, but if I were to describe it, it would be called a hollow map. Now, what do I mean by hollow map exactly? A hollow map is part of an open world where it lacks variety when compared to other parts of the world. Sometimes it's unintentional, while others it may be intentional for lore reasons. A good example I can give is New Austin from Red Dead Redemption 2. When you beat the game, you are able to explore New Austin, expecting to revisit the place again from the first game, except the world feels so empty, dead, and hollow. It didn't make me feel comfortable explaining further, as the more I go, the more empty it becomes. So where am I going with this? Well, when you finish the half part of the game, you are able to explore Kamiagata, the snowiest part of Tsushima, where I could categorize it as a hollow map. I should have mentioned this before, but this is just my subjective opinion. If you really enjoyed exploring Kamiagata, it doesn't mean I think that you are wrong or think less of you. If you like Tsushima from head to toe, or Kamiagata is your favorite sector of the game, that is perfectly fine. In fact, I would envy you if you feel that way, but for me, Kamiagata feels rather underwhelming the moment I stepped in. Of course, some will argue that it's obviously meant to be that way due to lore reasons, maybe geographically or historical accuracy, and that's perfectly valid claim to make. But even if it is valid, there's still room for criticism. Remember, everything is inherently flawed, nothing is perfect. Now, on to the point. Kamiagata feels completely underwhelming for me because of the atmosphere feels the same. The white and gray palette of colors just sucks the life out of me. While some will argue it's intended to be that way and you could just not go there, and that may be true, it still doesn't change the fact that I don't enjoy 1/4 of the map. Imagine you own this really nice looking house, however you cannot change anything what's inside, but it offers pretty much everything you need. A nice room, kitchen, a nice garage, a garden, anything that you can imagine, but there's a one room that bothers you which looks like this. It's kind of depressing to look at, and I don't take this the wrong way, but this could be taken as a compliment, as again, it's kind of meant to be that way. But maybe it's a different game, similar to how the creator of Five Nights at Freddy turned their game into a horror game and it worked well. Or maybe I'm just saying this because I have somewhat agoraphobia. Anyways, on to the topic at hand. I think Tsushima is a fantastic map to explore, as they are indeed beautiful locations to visit, as there are more beauty you see in the world. The more incentivized you feel to explore every corner of the map, and Sucker Punch did an amazing job at making the world feel alive. The combat reminds me a bit of Assassin's Creed Unity, as it followed the same difficulty curve as you need to upgrade equipment to fight tougher enemies, but on a whole new level. By diversing the enemy type, different fighting techniques, enemies are more aggressive and progression. Your main weapon is a katana. When fighting enemies, there are two types of attacks, light and heavy. Light attacks are your standard attack, as regardless of what stance you're in, it will deal the same type of damage and speed. However, you will come across different enemy types throughout your journey: swords, shield, spears, brutes with shields, brutes with spears and shield, and brutes with cannons. For this, you rely on a thing called stance, which there are 4 types: stone, water, wind, and moon. Yes, moon, obviously. These stances work more as a counter move rather than an offensive move. Attacking swordsmen with a stone attack will break their defense, water with shield, wind with spears, and moon with brutes. You earn these stances by observing and or killing a Mongol leader in their base. Using stealth is obviously the more rewarding path, as you observe the Mongol leader and kill it, and you'll learn it twice. But you aren't always going to be fighting with your sword, as you have other gears with you. You have the half bow, the longbow, as well as the kunai as your ranged weapons. For the progression to the game, you'll get the smoke bomb, which in my opinion is the most overpowered tool you have, since it gives you free assassination that will instantly kill enemies, especially if you have multi-assassination ability, which makes the setup more useful when you are crowded. However, you have very few of them, so you have to use them wisely even if you fully upgrade your capacity. My first playthrough of the game was in lethal difficulty, and enemies are extremely aggressive and deal massive damage, so you must make sure to learn techniques by doing side missions. These techniques will cause resolve when used, which you have to be careful when using them because they can revive you when your health is at 0, which leads me to the downside of this mechanic. You see, when your health is at 0, you are on the ground and the only thing you can do is either let the Mongols execute you or spend 3 resolve to get revived. The problem is that it is quite simple to get resolve, which you'll mostly get by killing enemies, perfect parries, or perfect dodges if you practice hard enough. Not that it is a bad thing, nor saying you shouldn't have one, but it would mostly make a lot of sense if you had medicine or herbs as a way to revive yourself. I believe Final Fantasy XV did a better job at making a revive system when you are down. You have the choice to revive yourself with a Phoenix Sound, which are rare items to get in the game and are expensive to purchase them, which adds layers of difficulty and makes players think strategically what to do and when to use them, as those items are quite valuable. But the resolve system simply feels like a cop-out move, at least in my opinion. It would much be preferable if it had a limit of how much you can use them depending on the difficulty you selected. Like in normal mode, you can revive 5 times, hard mode 3 times, and lethal mode 1 or even 0 times. Throughout most of my playthrough, I've picked the ghost route, so you could say it didn't bother me a lot throughout my playthrough. But I want to ask the players who play the samurai route and tell me in the comments what you think of the revive system in the game, and I want to know if you feel the same page as I do. Anyways, I think that's all I had to say about the combat, so let's get on with the next section of the game. As I mentioned in my previous section, I mostly played choosing the ghost route rather than the samurai one, as it is my favorite type of gameplay style, as you probably know if you ever watched my previous videos. Doing self-assassination never felt so satisfying, as the animation does an amazing job at giving an impactful kill. As much as I like the stealth in this game, it does have that video game trope where enemies have tunnel vision and for some reason they can't look up, as if you could be on a 7-foot tent and enemies for some reason can't see you. I'm not really bashing it, I just find it a bit funny. Overall, stealth in this game is creative, and the developers made a good job at making every single loadout useful in every stealth mission. While cherry bombs are by default a better form of distraction, chimes also are useful and can help lure a single enemy and take them out one by one. As this might not be related to stealth, I'm disappointed that you cannot replay bases, as it gives a lot of replay value and gives player a lot of creativity on how to take over bases in more stealthily and creative way. The only replay value you get is New Game Plus, which resets the map, but you'll have to complete the main mission to take over the bases all over again, which just makes it time consuming. Overall, it is still fun to try out different methods in New Game Plus as you have become more experienced. The lore of Ghost of Tsushima is worth being invested, as Jin Sakai has an amazing character development throughout the story. I also did enjoy the side characters as they are fleshed out and interesting characters on their own. You start by going war with the Mongols, 100 samurais versus thousands of Mongols. You play as Jin Sakai, the last samurai of Tsushima, and discover that your uncle was captured by Kotal Khan. However, Jin has a samurai code which he promised not to make, but then discovers that his methods only leads to endangering the people he is trying to save. I really enjoyed this concept a lot, as at first impression I thought that depending on the route that you take, it will affect the story outcome. However, this illusion breaks. Regardless if you want to play this game as a full-on samurai, the story and the main mission will lead to the ghost route. You see, there is no karma system or reputation meter in this game. Which is weird because Sucker Punch actually made this system in the Infamous series, where depending on how you take down enemies, cutscene and the atmosphere of the game will change and will lead to different endings. But hold on, Crone, the game is called Ghost of Tsushima, not The Last Samurai of Tsushima, so obviously the story is about Jin becoming the ghost. Which is fair to point, but why is Infamous called Infamous if the Infamous route leads to the evil ending, but I have to show it not to be Infamous and pick the heroic route? Not to mention that according to Sucker Punch, they stated that the heroic ending is considered canon while the Infamous ending isn't canon in Infamous, Infamous 2, and Infamous Second Son. So why isn't Infamous, Infamous 2, and Infamous Second Son called Heroic, Heroic 2, and Heroic Second Son? Checkmate, atheist. But it still raises the question, why is the story more focused and centered around Jin becoming the ghost rather than letting the player choose the route for Jin? It kinda breaks the immersion when playing the game, as it kinda falls under the same issue that Odyssey had, where it doesn't matter if you slaughtered a village, you are still considered the hero of Greece. Having a karma system would have added more replay value because most players would have done the ghost gameplay and then play the game again to play as a samurai to unlock different endings. But without it, Jin feels disconnected from the main story when you're exclusively playing as a samurai. Because the central focus of the game is about breaking the samurai code, and that left the impression to the player whether or not the main character should stick with the code. But the story doesn't follow the player's action at all. Sure, there are missions where you have to fight a samurai, but you can use ghost weapons to assassinate enemies and there is no consequence. There is a main mission where you fight along Lord Shimura take over a base, and I used the ghost weapons to kill Mongols instantly, and Lord Shimura doesn't even bat an eye that you are killing Mongols in a dishonorable way. But when you use Ghost Stand, which you unlock later in the game when taking over the fort of Kamiagata, that's when he calls you out for being dishonorable. Like, what? Don't get me wrong, the story is fantastic, and I bet my soul that this game better make it to the Game Awards and get their Game of the Year. This game has a lot of memorable moments, and as I mentioned, Jin has the best character development and the most satisfying arc in the game.
Tell them you are Jin Shimura, loyal servant to the Shogun. My heir. My son. I am not your son. I am the ghost. And you will be judged for it.
Truly a masterpiece. Suck on that, Naughty Dog. So, we are finally at the conclusion of the video. There is sure a lot to talk about, like multiplayer, New Game Plus, but I haven't really finished New Game Plus, and doing multiplayer review would have seemed more like a rant than a review. But despite the critiques that I gave, do I think Ghost of Tsushima is worth the $60? Yes, absolutely. And if you're planning it to get on Ghost of Tsushima on the PS5, I really do recommend getting it, as it is a must-have exclusive. However, if you're hesitant on spending $60 to $70 on the game, you should buy this game in a discount, as it is worth the experience. For my final rating, I'm not gonna use the number, instead I'll be ranking them by a tier list. I give Ghost of Tsushima an S+. Also, Sucker Punch? Where is Sly 5?